Benjamin Castle are Americans. Watching the footy.
Liam Ryan saying, kick it my way, I want to jump over the pack, and here he comes! Ryan!
This is Buddy Franklin! This is the greatest showman!
Got the handball off to Myers. Myers looking for the lead of Stengel. Gee, they're good. Gee, they're sharp. Razzle dazzle Rioli.
Oh, who else? McDonald! Around the body. Jazz up!
He's off from inside the centre square. Boys kick the goal. Boys kick the goal from inside the centre. Fuck! I can't believe it.
Good time of day, everyone, and welcome to episode 224 of Americans Watching the Footy. I'm Benjamin Castle, coming to you from San Diego, California.
I'm Ethan Castle, coming to you from South San Francisco, California. And we're going to kick this one off with a little segment I like to call News That Was Already Outdated by the time our last episode got uploaded that we now need to correct. And Marcus Bonampelli's going to miss like 6 weeks. That calf thing that sounded minor, there were scans, and I guess it's not minor.
Literally called a complex calf injury by Bulldogs social staff, breaking the Western Bulldogs.
Fortunately, this is a perfect opportunity for Jack.
Matthew Kennedy, game on. Also, Zach Butters is missing 6 to 8 weeks with an injury of his own.
Now, I saw from, I think it was Chad Corns, that he wouldn't be surprised if it's less than 6 weeks, but it's still significant. You know, I feel a good bit better about Port's ability to withstand that than I do about the Bulldogs.
Well, Port don't have as many other blows to their midfield depth as the Bulldogs do, for one. I mean, I don't know what happened with the Dogs training regimen this summer and how they got this so unbelievably wrong.
See, this is where if this was an episode of American Dad, it would cut to a montage of like Roger leading all their training and having them do very stupid things or just party the entire time.
Roger's footy trainer name be
Lachlan Kangaroo.
Is Lachlan Kangaroo 2 on the nose?
Trying to think of maybe something else the last name could be. Well, the fake Australian name I had come up with, if they ever wanted an Australian punter for the East-West Bowl, was Brody Crocodilius Stingray.
You know what? We'll just go with Lachlan Kangaroo for now. I think that one will actually work.
Lachlan Kangaroo, footy trainer to the stars. Is there any other like injury news or anything?
Now, right now, I'm just going through Giggs' tweets, seeing his anagrams, because Marcus Bontempelli Footscray is an anagram of calf restoration, my club mopes. And also, Bulldogs complex calf injury is an anagram of flag or cup, lol, my club's jinxed. I don't know how he does this. By the way, all of this comes after the Bulldogs admin posted, "Don't freak, he'll be okay." So we went through 6 of 18 clubs on our last episode before that news became outdated. And it's 6 more tonight. Had a decent mix of ladder positions so far. Let's keep that up here with our 7th home and away preview. And we start with the reigning premiers, the Brisbane Lions.
Ooh, I have injury news with them, actually. Brandon Starcevich got concussed in Community Series matchup with the Crows, so he is out for opening round.
The injuries for the Lions are largely on the defensive side. We know that Kadeem Coleman is still rehabbing from his ACL injury. Same can be said for Darcy Gardner. Lincoln McCarthy returned to fuller training ahead of that match, which was brilliant to see. But you know, Ethan, the AFL's greatest streak is being maintained by the Brisbane Lions.
Yes, not having the grand final lineup ever repeat.
Because no Joe.
I mean, he got to take his very weird ride off into the sunset, which I'm in favor of.
Do we need very weird? I feel like that was implied when we just mentioned Joe Danaher.
Oh, yeah.
Last year in 27 games, Danaher kicked 58-51, which is beautiful. Second most goals he had kicked, most behinds. I believe he led the league in behinds.
That reminds me that this year I want to do a behind of the week every week.
Yeah, we're looking at that. We're also thinking of assist of the week, right?
Yes. I mean, that'll just probably be Brian almost every week. Now, could we give out assist of the week for like what should have been a really cool assist and then, he ends up blowing the shot?
I don't think so. I think it has to go down to the stat sheet as an assist.
Okay, fine with that.
And Joe had a career high 16 assists last year too.
So he is one to replace now.
Like, he retired at the peak of his powers in all the right and wrong ways. I mean, he definitely still had a few years left in the tank, but he made it very clear at the end of 2023 for Lions staff, had they won then, he would have gone out. He was going to have one more year and that was it, and made the most of it. I mean, that performance that he put on in the second semifinal to beat Sam Taylor and finish that 44-point comeback is the stuff of legends.
See, it's funny. I've compared him at times to Zach Greinke, and Zach Greinke really hasn't officially retired. He's just kind of still officially a player.
Yeah, I mean, Greinke played, a total of 20 seasons. But Joe doesn't have like those sort of weird interactions with fans. And also Joe has something that Greinke doesn't, a championship.
That's what you call a bruh moment.
For Zach, yeah. And yes, it might only be one magnet that you're losing from that premiership team, but holy cow, that's an extremely tough one to replace in terms of stature and how so much of the attention gravitated toward him. Wherever he was on the oval, like that forward 50 look is going to be dramatically different. Eric Hipwood doesn't replace that. This is why I was hoping that they would go after Tim Membry, try to poach him for a move interstate. Instead, they're backing in their own guys, and I mean, Sam Day, yay.
I like Sam Day.
But the expectation is not for him to be playing every week, is it?
I wouldn't think so, but I like him.
I like the idea of him. Last year, Day kicked 10-4 in 5 games.
I think he's a perfectly viable player that the Suns should have been giving more time to, so I'm totally okay with this.
I like the thought of him. I just don't know how much we're actually going to be able to get out of him and how much he'll be backed in. I mean, for now, if you're thinking about the full forward line, my first thought is Hipwood centering, Cameron and Lohman? Or maybe Morris in there. I mean, I think the best hope for the Lions is Logan Morris and their academy pickup Ty Gallup being the solution long-term there, both of them growing into their bodies a bit more.
Well, actually, one of my sleeper pick here could be a pretty good solution there.
I haven't even looked at yours, but that automatically makes me think Henry Smith, who made a couple appearances last year. I forget if he has his first AFL goal yet.
And yeah, I picked him not because he did anything that wowed me, but because right body type, has an opportunity to work his way up the ranks. So I'm going with it.
And he'd be valuable for his work as a second ruck as well. I mean, I think that's, as of now, his potential biggest asset. Because if you think about who else took the hitouts last year, if it wasn't Big O or Premiership player Darcy Fort, when Smith was in there, he had those chances. I mean, we saw it a little bit from Darcy Gardner before he got hurt, but yeah, there's an opening there too. I mean, there's an opening on the tall side in general for this team. If I recall, maybe Jack Payne took a couple as well. And the thought of Payne and full back is interesting too, because what's the deal once Tom Duday's healthy?
That's a good problem to have, though.
I hope it doesn't come at the cost of Jack Payne's spot, because the Payne-Andrews tandem has been one of the strong points. When the Lions have been going well defensively, Payne and Andrews have had this ability to play off each other. I forgot that the Lions just had this sort of ACL run near the start of the year, too, because there was Coleman in opening round last year, and then Duday was still recovering from one from his time in Adelaide. And then he had the two together in the Logan Morris game.
And then Duday had another, right?
Yeah, another setback there.
And that's one of the things that makes their championship last year so remarkable. Look, Kadeen Coleman was definitely the most significant of those. So it's not they lost Lachie Neal or anything, but they lost enough significant players that it could have had pretty devastating effects. And they came out of it on the other side with a flag.
I mean, Kadeem Coleman was their best in the grand final in 2023. Meanwhile, who stepped up at age 32 to play some of his best footy and his first complete season in eons was Froggy. And that honestly to me was the best story not called Joe Danaher, was that of Ryan Lester. He's one whose spot is probably most at risk, honestly, once Duday's healthy. We knew who the Lions would be adding to their list a long time ago between Levi Ashcroft, Sam Marshall, and Ty Gallup. The only out other than Joe was Harry Sharp, who requested a trade to Melbourne. I think that's a nice opportunity for him there. The depth is apparent on this team, and they'll have plenty of younger players already with some AFL experience, and they're able to move the ball more as you look out toward the wing and halfback. I'm looking forward to potentially more time for one of the best names of the AFL, if not the best, in Shadow Brain, along with Bruce Reville. And I've been having a tough time calling him a sleeper given his time last year, but given that I would expect it to be lower in the pecking order, especially once Kadeen is in, and given the time Kalachi has had, I think I'm going to go with Bruce, but with a bit of an asterisk.
You can do better than that. I mean, can you though? Because there's, it's a lot of established quantities.
Bruce is honestly one of the lesser established ones at this point. A category B guy, going to be 24 early on in the year. We haven't seen him play a full game since round 17 last year at the AFL level. So what more can he do in his second year as an AFL player? Who are the guys that he can model his game after a little more, learn from?
Beat the giant monkey man and save the ninth dimension.
Okay, start smaller.
Defeat the little monkey man and save the eighth dimension.
We could go on with this.
The smallest you can think of.
What would be like the next step down if we're doing this gradually from defeating the little monkey man and saving the eighth dimension? You know what? I'm going to ask Derek. I'm going to text him that.
He does work for Nickelodeon, so good question there. The Lions double ups are, unsurprisingly, Sydney, also Collingwood, Geelong, Gold Coast, Hawthorn, and the Bulldogs. You're the Premiers, your schedule should be unforgiving.
I forgot we play the Lions twice. Why did I think opening round was our only meeting with them?
No, but I think in a limited round like that, all of those games should be double ups. And yet, that's the only one I think that is.
Oh yeah, it's Friday night, round 15.
Obtaining a preseason game between the Lions and the Crows, where you can clearly still see they're feeling out that forward structure. Just how can they bridge that gap to the lesser experienced players? When are they going to bring in some of the other newer talent? Based on what we saw last night, though, forward, I mean, it was Hipwood there, getting that fuller time there, along with Sam Day, who was listed as a starting full forward.
I think we're going to know pretty quickly just how important Joe Danaher was.
We say often across sports, and I think perhaps it's most apparent in basketball, that you can only really judge a player's worth once they're out of a lineup. We're going to find that out, honestly, within the first 2 or 3 games for the Lions, just how much Danaher meant structurally. And that's the biggest question, because other things seem pretty natural there. The process of Lohman and Rayner succeeding Charlie Cameron, for example.
Oh, I think these guys have more than enough small forward ability. There are more than enough small forwards already.
And this opening run for the Lions is, you know what? It's actually pretty forgiving right away. Yes, there's Geelong and then at Sydney round 1, but they host the Eagles round 2. No, they don't play the Eagles out west this year. Sad. Then a bye and then Richmond before playing the Bulldogs at Norwood in.
Gather round.
So this first month will be a good feeling out period for them. And I mean, they didn't start last year too strongly, and look how it finished.
Yeah, that's another thing that, again, made their run last year so remarkable, is they did themselves no favors by starting off so poorly. And you think, okay, they're going to get to a point where they run out of steam and expended all that energy from trying to work their way back into it, sort of like 2023 Geelong.
And then they just didn't.
Like, I don't know if maybe it's because I wasn't watching the grand final live. Maybe I just didn't give enough credit to this Lions run. I mean, I definitely did in our like recap and stuff, but I think after that, maybe I just didn't think about it enough.
Well, those are premieres as we look ahead to less than a week from now. Holy shit, this feels good to see that it's even closer than it appears in our side mirrors.
The really difficult run isn't until later in the year. You know, the last couple before the bye are going to be tricky, before their later bye. At Adelaide, home against GWS, at Geelong, then out of the bye, home against Port, at Carlton, home against the Bulldogs, at Gold Coast, at Collingwood, home against the Swans, at Freo, home against Hawthorn. Well, yeah, they actually get to play Hawthorn at home for once. And their away game against the Hawks will be at the G, not in Tasmania, not at Marvel. But away games against Hawthorn have not gone well for them altogether, no matter where they've been.
That's an interesting stretch there. Firstly, they go to Bellerive, which just is weird scheduling to me that they're going out to Tasmania to play North in round 9, hosting Melbourne, and then at Hawthorn at the G for the Sir Doug Nicholls rounds. And then Essendon, who the hell knows, before that Adelaide stretch. Like round 9 on, I mean, this Lions schedule is going to be a fun one. But yeah, it seems like it's been a while. Yeah, the Lions haven't hosted Hawthorn since before we started watching 2019 round 11. And this is a head-to-head matchup that has gone significantly in the home team's favor. All I'm thinking about now is that 2022 fucking ridiculousness with some of the most unforgiving umpiring I've ever seen.
Oh my God, that was bad. But okay, looking at this, I think this is a great schedule for narrative building because it lends itself to them getting off to a good start, maybe dropping one of their first couple games, but at least getting off to a pretty friendly start. And then it really ramps up. So like they should be in a position where maybe they lose one of their first 2. I think losing at Sydney is way more likely than losing the opener, but hopefully I'm wrong there. But maybe there's enough, was there a premiership hangover? One early game for that. Then they're going to get themselves off to a nice start and be, like probably 7-3 or so, maybe better. And then it really ramps up. And then it's like, can they repeat? And they'll be getting a lot of primetime games every week between being the reigning premiers and the opponents they'll be facing and having a good record. And yeah, we will be talking about the Brisbane Lions a lot this year. I feel very confident in that. They should be right at the center of attention all year long. Yeah.
If they're succeeding, of course we'll talk about them. If they're not, it's going to be like Collingwood last year. So those are the premiers, and now it's Norfin time. Well, I think their round 1 game just got a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd call anything easy for North except for maybe playing Richmond this year, but at the very least on paper looks much more winnable.
I actually don't dislike this opening 3-game stretch for them with the Bulldogs and the return game for Caleb Daniel.
I mean, playing at Adelaide is far from easy. You never expect a team from the bottom few on the ladder to go out and pick up any sort of out-of-state points. That would be foolish to assume.
But they also have Melbourne in round 2 on Sunday afternoon. That's another very early narrative building game for both of those sides. You win one of those first 2 for North, and a lot of wheels start turning in terms of media and elsewhere. And North have definitely moved up the timeline with the acquisitions that they made in the spring and the summer, with not just Caleb Daniel coming in, but also Jack Darling and Luke Parker, finally adding on that sort of seasoned veteran mentorship that we've been looking for a while for them.
I'm going to hold you right there.
Hold up.
I don't know if I'm going to call it moving up the timeline. I think it's just raising the floor. It gives them, to borrow the term from Jake Mintz of Baseball Barbacast, it gives them more adults in the room.
It gives them less of an excuse, I'll say, as well. But these do feel like the pieces they've been waiting for a while, though. I mean, guys who still have a solid few years left that think they could see finals again, even on this list before their career's up. The other reason why I do say a little bit about moving up the timeline is that they don't have their first round pick for 2025.
This made no sense. This was kind of like the SpongeBob good, now let him have it.
Great! Now let him have it!
You can have it. Say thanks.
They tried to move back into the first round, I think starting from pick 8, and finally managed to do it at 27. And Matt Whitlock is a nice pickup and all, but giving up your future first for that and not dumbing down the offer as time went on, that's brave. Like brave in the British Australian slang sense. I'm saying stupid.
Stupid, stupid, stupid!
That better work.
And for their sake, I hope it does.
Yeah, Matt Whitlock's going to have a lot more pressure attached to him.
For better or worse. You know, guys who are in trades are always linked to each other, but Whitlock is going to be compared to that unknown, which I think just fascinates me. Couple things I'm looking for here. Charlie Coleman really liked his work as a fullback last year, but did also flex forward late. Does he stay back where I think he belongs? Similarly, does Griffin Logue stay back? If you're establishing those guys as your talls in the back, I think that's the right move here, because the smaller pieces are potentially starting to fall in place around them. Players like Jackson Archer and maybe Colby McKercher, though I want to see him get more midfield minutes.
Yeah, one of my biggest focuses on this team this year, and this was something I was thinking about taking a shower the other night, was what is this team, what is Colby McKercher year 2 going to look like? Because year 2 for Harry Sheezel, we got to see him actually deployed in a fun role, and I can't really say that we got to see as much of that with year 1 Sheezel, so hopefully year 2 McKercher is similar to year 2 Sheezel, where we get to see him do some cool stuff, just have some of those like wow moments. You're good for one really fun Sheezel possession a game, right? I hope we're able to say we get to see the same thing with McKercher, and maybe comparing him to Sheezel is a little bit of an unnecessarily high bar. I just want to see something more than volume, because he was a volume guy. He had fantasy value. Great. I didn't see him do a lot of actually things that win you games. So that's his job for year 2.
Thinking back to his highlights last year, he had that 1-5 bounce run and also one of the barrel assists of the year. Yes. But those moments were few and far between. Looking at how they're organizing themselves for their preseason hit out in Bunbury, they've got Coleman and Logue as fullbacks and McKercher listed as a wing.
Well, that would give him chances for more 5 bounce runs. And oh yeah, I'm going to get my licks in, going to make fun of them selling home games. That's going to be something I talk about a lot this year, especially if they lose those games. The funniest scenario by far would be for that to end up mattering, they barely miss out on finals.
Or if Rio only makes finals because they win their home game against North.
Yeah, and barely win it.
Barely.
I mean, they had a pretty thrilling finish last time they played out west.
Yeah, I feel like there's a great chance for that to be sort of like the end of the Frio game against Carlton in the
Gather round.
Surely this won't come back to bite them later. Now, I really hope that North do not do anything to fix what is now the longest head-to-head streak in the league now that Gold Coast finally beat Port, because Geelong have won 13 straight against North.
13!
Next longest is Melbourne's 12 straight over Gold Coast, and then Essendon has 11 straight over North, so you can go and beat Essendon. That's fine. I am a little worried about that. What is it they're celebrating against Geelong? Is it 125 years?
Their centennial of joining the AFL or VFL from the VFA.
Okay, that's a game that I might be at. We'll see. A lot of this is going to be, for my trip. We're going to know a lot more somewhere around round 9 or whenever they drop the schedules for the end of the year.
Yeah, that game isn't until round 20. You mentioned that Essendon game, though. Something else that's brave. Putting North on a Thursday.
Ooh, I didn't even look at that. You know what? Doing it against Essendon, at least, you have the Brad Scott angle.
I mean, those games are sometimes unnecessarily or unreasonably close. I'm thinking about Massimo's heroics in a high-scoring game in 2023.
Oh, yeah.
That's Thursday, May 1st in round 8. Is Essendon a double up for North? It is not. They've got Adelaide, Carlton, Melbourne, Richmond, Sydney, and the Bulldogs. So that's 3.6 Redkin there.
3.6. Not great, not terrible.
They got a stretch starting Easter that I see as a particular challenge with Good Friday against Carlton. Then they've got to go to Port. So once again, Jason Horne-Francis doesn't get to play North in Victoria. Boo. Then the Essendon game, round 8. In Tasmania against the Lions, round 9. That 4-game stretch is one of their more formidable ones. A break by playing Richmond, maybe a break there, before going at it against Collingwood heading into their bye. And then it's after the bye that they have their Western tenancy with the first ever AFL game at Hands Oval in round 13.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to say it.
Throwing hands?
No. Will Mr. Hands be there for the coin toss?
I had blissfully forgotten about that.
He has to be there for the coin toss, right?
He has to.
You sound really disappointed about that, too.
I'm disappointed that I had to remember it, Ethan.
I don't want to, put this responsibility on anybody, but that feels like, I don't know if it's necessarily like a Sav Megafan tweet, but someone we follow in the footy community would have to be, brave enough to tweet out, here for the coin toss for the first game at Hands Oval, Mr. Hands.
Yeah, that does sound like Sav.
I don't know if it's him or one of the other shit posters we follow, but it definitely seems like a thing that has to happen.
Thinking back to the positives for North last year, development and blossoming of Harry Sheasel was the biggest, largely all-Australian caliber Tristan Cherry. And he still had, Larkin wasn't thrown into many ruck contests, but he gave some opportunities elsewhere. Maybe Griffin Lowe could grow back into that as he could potentially have a full year. Fingers crossed there. You could get a healthy Bryn Teakle in there, and maybe Callum Coleman-Jones has something more to offer this year, praying for his health also. Funny, I've been thinking about Callum Coleman-Jones a lot, actually. And the reason is because there is a Coleman-Jones who plays for San Diego State men's basketball. That being the completely unrelated Jared Coleman-Jones, a transfer from Northwestern and Middle Tennessee State. I know that the jury is out for some on Jackson Archer, but I think we were both very positive about his output last year.
I also was really impressed with Callan Dawson at times, who was actually my sleeper last year.
Not a bad one at that. Who's yours this year? Is it somebody who's gotten AFL time?
I think he got a couple games just because I think Colby McKercher would be too easy a pick. I went with Riley Hardiman. Didn't they throw him in last year? I think it was actually at Geelong, and it was like, okay, you've been thrust into the fire way, way too early.
That might not have been him.
They did that with somebody for their game at Geelong, and now I'm going to have to check AFL tables to remember who it was.
Yeah, Hardiman played round 7 through 9, so losses to the Crows, Saints, and Suns.
It was definitely their game at Geelong where they threw in somebody, and it was like, okay, this is just setting you up to fail. We threw you out there way too early. I'll also look at the box from the second meeting when they got off to a really nice start, kicked the first 3 goals, and then the Cats took care of business, which I watched from Boston or just outside of Boston. Yeah. All right, let's see. Who was it at round, 5 game? You know what? I think it was Tyler Sellers.
I think he was delisted, actually. Yeah, they gave Sellers the opportunity there when they were, once they had, I think, some injuries and just poor play from the Talls, and unfortunately, that didn't work out.
Let's see, it was also one of Zane Dersma's earlier games. But yeah, McKercher got subbed off. I think he was hurt. I got to look at our substitution tracker for once. This is fun. We got to dust this off. I haven't had to look at this in ages. But yeah, McKercher was injured, yes. But I totally remember Sellers being thrown in, and it was like, you are not up for this yet. Hugh Greenwood was also invisible. And then when they played again in Tasmania, they had tried Bryn Teakle out there in addition to Tristan Jerry. That was weird. They had Charlie Comben out there. But I think I had this question last year too, but I think it really needs to be answered this year. Who is going to be next past your main guys? Because we have established that Nick Larkey is really good and gets a bunch of goals even when he is the focus of the opposing defense. We have established Charlie Coleman as a really good defender. I like Callan Dawson's defense as well, but like, who's going to be next? I need to see building depth. I need to see more than just the same couple of awesome guys every week.
Those draft picks will be a big part of that, as will the other young addition for them, and a guy that I am wanting to focus on more because there's been good things from him as a smaller forward option from intra-club match and some match sim, and that is Jacob Constanti, whose biggest contribution to AFL footy so far has been wrestling Callum Mills.
Did he come over in the same move as Luke Parker?
Yeah, he was the piece that actually kind of made that happen, Constanti. And I think he'll have a decent amount of chances early as a small forward option because I think it's probably between him and Rob Hansen Jr., who we've seen a bit of already. He had a nice run in the earlier part of the VFL season last year, Constanti, with a 6-game goal streak, scoring goals in 8 of 9 games before suffering an injury a couple weeks later. So if you got that sort of performance for the Swans in the twos, you'll get opportunities at the AFL level pretty quickly for a team near the bottom of the ladder.
What is the best case scenario for this team? You know, the best case scenario is probably still they win a few games but end up with like the second or third pick.
But they won't have the second or third pick.
Oh, shit. Right. Well, in that case, then I think we can just straight up ask, what is their best case scenario? Like, let's say they have really, really good health, only minor injuries. What are the most games they could win?
Well, they didn't win any games last year by more than 13.
13!
And those were all against lower ladder teams. But they also had a few close losses in there. And with the new guys they have in the room, I'm not sure about wins, but I feel like the ladder position, like I'd be surprised to see them above 13.
Okay, what about just number of wins?
Last year, 13th got you 11 wins. Maybe it needs to a little lower than like 7 or 8 doesn't seem crazy if you're on an upward trajectory. But are they on an upward trajectory?
Next question, who could they finish ahead of to get up there besides Richmond and West Coast? I mean, I guess it would have to be what? Like
Melbourne, Saints, one of the South Australian teams.
I think the Crows are the much more likely of the two there. Maybe the Suns?
It's a weird feeling that either both South Australian teams are making finals or neither of them are.
I still like the idea of Port making it not Crows.
Boring. I want them both to make it. I'll say that then.
You want a final showdown.
It's only happened once. Imagine the Crows ending Ken Hinckley's Port career.
Honestly, my interest in them has definitely gone up the last couple of years. Like, the only team that I am genuinely not very interested in entering this year is Richmond. But I feel like I'm more interested in North than I am in the D's and maybe the Suns. Because I think the Suns, I'm just at the point where it's like, tell me something different. Otherwise, you're just the same thing you've been, you know?
Thought it was actually going to show up as SOS on that spin, but instead it's gone right next to them and on the randomized wheel. That is the Blues.
Can we play it?
I'm already doing it. 8th place last year,
Shouldn't have made finals.
bounced out by the reigning premiers in absolutely humiliating fashion, 60-0.
It was really like the why are you here type deal. I mean, remember how much nobody wanted that final spot.
And yet it was still almost glorious. You know, we broke out the Charlie Wilson quote because Freo really did fuck up that endgame after Jack Higgins was a hero.
I think this is a team that could go in a lot of directions this year. I'm actually very interested in what they do. And yes, I will be preying on their downfall, but I will be interested in how they play.
Saw some glimpses of their preseason against the Giants, and they came out firing. Really, really good look from Cooper Lord, who has been touted to maybe one day get into more of that Patrick Cripps role. He's a chance to play round 1. I really like the way he finished the season last year. His name and performance sticks with me a bit more because he did have that game against West Coast. That was his debut, in fact. And he finished the season strongly against the Saints as well. But the real big one from that preseason game was Lucas Camporeale looking like he could slot into the wing right away.
I was surprised that the Camporeales got drafted so low because they were hyped up having done pretty well in like some of the state level games and things like that.
Was a bit of a surprise. They've been hyped up a lot. It seemed that then around the middle of last year, some of that fell off, but we knew they were going to get there. They both have. Also looked like a pretty solid game for easily the most fun name on Carlton's list, Hit It BT.
Orazio Fantasia.
So you'd expect him to be in at half forward to start the year. Definitely a different look for the Blues between Fantasia being back into things, maybe a return for Jack Silvani, Nick Haynes slotting into the back, and some spots open in the forward line too, honestly. We'll see what's the deal with Elijah Hollins. He's hardly been playing for the preseason. I hope that's just management because I'm really impressed by Hollins in that midfield to forward role he's started out with at the Blues. My sleeper pick is one who is a more versatile forward on the taller side, but maybe he could be cast a bit smaller, and that's Ashton Moyer, another one who had a debut against the Eagles.
I think I've been a team where if you wanted to tell the story of their 2024 season, you could get some wildly different things depending on who you ask. The umpires would tell you that Patrick Cripps carried them. And I think that's really disrespectful to some of the other players that actually had pretty good seasons for them.
That's why I want to make a point about Elijah Hollins, for example.
Or George Hewitt, who got 3 votes from the umpires and 10 from us. Tom DeConing, 8 from us, 1 from the umpires. Sam Walsh got 9 from us and 16 from the umpires. But yes, both Hollins brothers, I think, are worth mentioning.
Well, there's going to be a real question in terms of halfback distribution now because of Nick Newman's ruptured patellar tendon. Even at age 32, Newman is the second most important guy in that back structure for the Blues, behind, of course, Jacob Wiedering.
This is a team that's already had a couple significant injuries. Mark Pittenet could be out through round 4 or 5, which means Tom DeConing and your 50 pounds of tape, you need to stay healthy.
And I guess other than that, Harry Mackay doing a decent amount of second ruck.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious if maybe they have someone else they could throw into that.
As in whom? Nick Haynes?
I don't know. I guess, or maybe, honestly, you could try Jacob Wiedering. I just think he's too important and too fragile already.
Yeah, that's why my thought went to Haynes instead. But remember, this team's without Charlie Curnow for at least round 1.
Boy, that's a tough game round 1. They're really going to miss him.
But what if?
God, it would be funny.
Oh, God, I would fucking love it.
Corey Durden, who is a very marginal player at this point, but still, that's depth. Alex Chincada, that is significant. I really like him.
I mean, you need somebody who can just know, okay, when tagging situations arise, you can go to him. For now, though, I think, would Hewitt be the guy in his absence? Where else would you look there, honestly? I mean, especially you don't have Kennedy out there to do the grunt work anymore.
Yeah, I guess so.
I mean, Hewitt's a clean player, and I think he's plenty capable of that. If it's all about opening up opportunities for Cripps and the rest, Hewitt does that well.
This is a team that I now officially say they are kind of teetering on a balance. They could end up right around, 6th through 8th again. They could end up being a legit top 4 team, or things could really go to shit with a lack of depth.
I mean, it's going to put a lot on Ollie Hollins and Lachie Cowan on both the movement and defensive sides. And Cowan's really been backed in. I know he's one that Patrick Cripps has been heaping praise on. Oh, I just remembered Lewis Young exists too if you're thinking about other ruck options, but that means you'll have to play Lewis Young.
Their fans haven't really hyped him up like they hyped up Liam Stalker, to be fair.
I'm reminded of how many of these pieces I actually enjoy watching for the Blues while not liking the team as a whole because it's the Blues. We've talked about a lot of them. Surprised we haven't mentioned the Leap Day boy himself, Mac Cottrell.
There's actually one that I was going to get to at some point. Also want to mention how nice it'll be to have Jack Silvani back, both because he's kind of a chaos player. He can play in different spots, and it's just like, even if you don't like Carlton, just knowing the Silvani family's role at that club, it's good that he's healthy.
And he's another ruck option too, but I just wouldn't put him in that too quickly. I mean, this is a guy coming back from multiple season-long injuries. Also, congrats to the tank on getting a list spot, Francis Evans.
He's going to be super annoying in a game against Geelong, I can tell already.
Is that a double up again?
No, it's just round 7, the Carlton home game.
Actual double ups for Carlton. Collingwood and Essendon, of course. Hawthorn again, good. North, Port, those were 2 fun meetings last year. Road victories both ways. And the Eagles.
So, I mean, appropriate for a team that finished 8th if you think about it. But having both North and West Coast is definitely a bit friendly. So this is the 7th or 6th easiest, depending on which metric you use. I mean, if you look at percentage of opponents, it's actually the 3rd easiest.
I'm less of a fan of that metric because that can so easily be thrown off by one team.
Yes, but the fact is they play both North and West Coast twice, and the other teams that get to do that are Melbourne, Adelaide, and Richmond. Now, if we're looking for the wow, this is a really nasty stretch of schedule, rounds 2 through 4 are pretty tricky, even though for not having to leave Melbourne, going Hawthorn, Bulldogs, Collingwood, rounds 7 through 11 right before the bye, Geelong at Adelaide, St. Kilda at Sydney, GWS. 16 through 18 at Port, home against Collingwood, Lions at Marvel. Looking at this more, I think it's fair to say this is a team that I will be hate watching a lot of this year. And I trust my analysis with hate watching altogether. I think I generally give pretty good analysis of teams that I don't like when I watch them pretty closely. I think for some people, it can be tough to do that. I think I'm actually pretty good at that. And yeah, I can't see a scenario in which there are a lot of Carlton games that I don't end up really glued to. This team opens, by the way, Thursday, Friday, Thursday.
Man, wasn't that the Bulldog shtick a couple years ago?
Yeah. Now, I think this is interesting because it's a very compelling set of games, but man, 4 straight to start, that is a lot.
And then after,
Gather round.
they've also got Good Friday before finally getting a Sunday game, round 7.
And then they've got the Marnbrook game in round 10. That's also a Friday.
And they'll also be in edition of Sunday Night Footy for this year.
That being Essendon round 13.
Yeah, the King's Eve game.
Which I'll be in Ohio for, and you might be coming back from Ohio.
I think my flight's later that Sunday. But yeah, we're going to be in Ohio for round 13 because our cousin's getting married.
And then I'll be in mostly Indiana for round 14. So yeah, I guess it's time to talk about breakout guys, sleeper guys, focus guys. It's kind of all the above. I don't know if we really gave it a title, but I went with Billy Wilson because I know he was close to selection last year. And you stole Ashton Moyer before I could get him.
I was going back and forth between Ashton Moyer and Bins, but I felt more passionate about picking Moyer because of the glimpse of the ceiling that we honestly saw on his debut and just the fun of that against West Coast. He struck me as what a medium to tall guy. He's 6'2", but can easily play above that height too. I also find it funny that I did a huge double take when I looked him up just now. The Glenelg photos that pop up just make me think Richmond because of the yellow sash. But Moyer's one who actually hasn't had a game yet as a player in the 22. Both of those were substitute appearances and he kicked goals in both. And that's encouragement in and of itself. Along with his VFL performance last year, despite not getting a huge number of touches, he was reliable for a goal a game for most of the year.
Also, Billy Wilson looks like someone who might be really good for the culture if he's interested in owning a farm.
I remember making this point. He totally fits in. Give him a headband. I keep changing my opinions about this team because of all the different injury blows that they've taken.
I think rounds 2 through 4 should tell us something.
I mean, it'll tell us a lot structurally to see what's to be done without Newman in there. Who's going to be the main support? Who's going to step up defensively other than Wiedering? Because I feel confident enough in the attack on this team. You know, it's not as dire a situation as Port where it's just Aliir, but Wiedering has had to carry a lot of defensive ability and the aerial work on his own. if that persists, knowing his fragility, there's plenty of reason to be concerned pretty quickly. And in what I think is a referendum year for Michael Voss, that's exactly the thing that you would probably want to hear, Ethan, with your Blues hate watching coming up.
Here's also something, as we wrap this up, about Michael Voss that I think is pretty fascinating. Because there are so many other hot seat coaches right now, I think some things would have to go wrong for him to really get a lot of attention.
This is a team that finds the headlines, though. They're Carlton.
Absolutely, but also I just look at this and see you could probably come up with 5 or 6 other coaches that are going to be in the spotlight before you get down to him.
Also, I'm looking forward to the signs that people might bring against Carlton this year, just because I think there's a lot of opportunity with the whole Luke Sayers saga being what it was. Remember, he was cleared by the AFL Integrity Unit, then immediately resigned anyway. Almost feels like, we'll try and cover things up if you just are willing to get the fuck out.
I think it was more of a, you can't fire me, I quit. We're not going to fire you. You can't fire me, I quit.
You know, Benjamin, 78% of our listeners are between 18 and 35 years old, so they probably want to start a podcast like we did. How did you know that number, Ethan? Thanks to the analytics we have for Spotify for Podcasters. Formerly known as Anchor, sorry Frio fans, Spotify for Podcasters has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or your computer. No fancy software needed. It's so easy you can edit it while drunk. And Spotify for Podcasters doesn't just allow you to upload to Spotify, you can also distribute your podcast on platforms like Apple, Stitcher, and more, just like we do. Best of all, it's completely free. Not only is it free, you can even make money from listener support or ad revenue. Hint, hint. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to podcasters.spotify.com to get started today.
And welcome back to episode 224, I think, of Americans Watching Footy. Is it 224?
Correct!
I'm Ethan Castle at Castle Media.
I'm Benjamin Castle at BenjaminHK01. The executive producer is, I don't know where he is because I'm in San Diego and he's not, but he's on Instagram account named Brian.
Yeah, he's not in the room at the moment, but he's doing just fine.
He's doing the needful.
Oh, by the way, we got a response from Derek. What you would need to defeat to save the 7th dimension would be the tiny monkey baby.
Thank goodness it's not the puppy monkey baby.
That was so fucking dumb. Most of, dumb Australian commercials are nowhere near that dumb. What's the worst footy commercial? Friday Night Footy? And that's not even that bad.
Primo.
Oh, yes, I was just going to say, those are pretty annoying. But they're as bad as some of the American ads we have to deal with.
No, most Australian ads are much more succinct, I think.
And just better and funnier, especially when they're for things we've never heard of.
They just seem more direct, I think.
When I get to Australia, I'm going to be very easily persuaded. And just if I saw it in a commercial, I have to try it. Like Red Rooster, gotta try it, saw it in commercials. Gotta go to Bunnings, saw it in the commercial.
I don't know what appliances we'll need down there, but a trip to Harvey Norman will probably take care of it. Go.
So sometimes I'm very easily persuaded by commercials, like watching cricket. Samosa ads definitely make me want samosas. And I've also been totally convinced anytime I'm at Costco, because it's so cheap, to get a hot dog and a double chocolate cookie.
Do we see any deep popcorn around?
I have not seen ads for them lately. Hopefully those come back, because those were hysterical. It's there's a lot of context we're missing here, clearly.
He took everything from her. Now, she will take everything from him. Deep popcorn.
So we've reached the halfway point of the previews, and we're going to do some more previewing. I'm just looking at something right now that I found interesting. We might have talked about this when we did our fixture focus. Melbourne is the only team to not face anyone who is in the top 6 in a double up. Everyone else faces at least one top 6, one middle 6, and one bottom 6.
Yeah, Melbourne's only finalist double up is Hawthorn, but you'd expect Collingwood to get back there too.
Yeah, in fact, Melbourne and Richmond are the only teams to only have one finalist, and then Hort, Brisbane, and Essendon are the ones who have 4. Essendon actually has a pretty decently difficult schedule now that I look at it. Also, it's weird that Essendon and Collingwood only play once.
I get that if you just give the big 4 double ups every year, then it just dries things up for a lot of other teams. But yeah, that does feel strange. We've had a decent number of double ups from them recently, though, like Anzac round and then the penultimate or closing round.
Yeah, I mean, like, as long as Essendon play, 2 of the 3 of Carlton, Collingwood, and Richmond twice, I think that's good. And they do have that this year. Let's spin the wheel.
Honestly, we could just keep going with this conversation.
Wait, is it actually Essendon?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's why I didn't stop you, man. Essendon were 11-11-1 last year in 11th. They had the same wins and place as 2023, just a marginal percentage achievement.
Because it was how they got there.
Yeah, I mean, they started 8-2-1, but those early wins were deceiving. Even the wins over finalists that they got during that stretch were when those opponents were down. Hawthorn at the start of the season, the Bulldogs early on, the Giants a little before halfway.
There were a lot of things that just didn't look sustainable. A lot of closer games that went their way at times.
That win against Freo sticks out to me just because of the frenetic ending of that. Just like, fuck, any score.
But since we're talking about it, we'll kind of go out of order here and talk about the schedule first. I think right after Dreamtime, they've got a pretty tough stretch. At Brisbane, that Sunday night game against Carlton, that's King's Birthday Eve. Then Geelong for the country game. Then at Freo on a Thursday.
That seems early to have the country game, round 14.
No.
Maybe just last year's was late, that's why.
No, it wasn't that late. It's just 1 year it was round 1. And then round 19 through the end of the year is pretty tricky, even though they only have to leave Victoria once. GWS home, Bulldogs home, at Sydney, at Geelong, Saints home, Carlton home at the G.
I'm glad they have Sydney twice because those games, at least one of them usually tends to be a pretty good one. Like, I guess last year was the exception, though we did see both teams get to triple digits. I think it was like 131-101 in that early meeting.
I'm now sad that they aren't playing the Crows twice because those games were so fun last year. What if that Thursday game against North ends up being kind of like that, where it was like, why is this a Friday game? And then it ends up being awesome.
Essendon and North, we've talked about it earlier on. Those tend to be unreasonably and unnecessarily close a lot of the time. So I hope so. Bring it. Essendon's double ups, Carlton, Geelong, Gold Coast, Richmond, Sydney, and the Bulldogs.
I am calling it now that round 8 game against North, we're going to end up glad it was a Thursday game.
Thought you were going to make that your draw call.
No, I haven't found a game that screams draw to me yet. Also, I just thought of something really funny. All over their website, it says be a bomber. You want to edit some of that and make it say Unabomber?
Okay.
It's an easy adjustment, so I think it would be kind of funny.
There's a connection there with my university.
So here's my thing. I don't look too deep into the community series, especially considering, Geelong not playing Bailey Smith and Tanner Bruhn.
And them giving Isaac Kako a bunch of space because Oisin Mullen didn't play him that closely. But I am totally on this Iraqi grind train.
I like Isaac Kako as well. And just as a whole, I thought Essendon looked pretty good. The midfield was physical. They were winning a bunch of ground balls. And, Jordan Ridley's got his hamstring thing. But defensively, they looked a good bit better. You see just how much of an effect having him or Jaden Laverde is. I think at this point with Ridley, I will put him into that Jason Johannesson category of he's great when he's actually out there. But I think there might be a solution. There are a couple of different defensive solutions. Bringing in Jackson Pryor, that's one of them.
Yeah, Pryor looked like he belonged there at halfback. I also do want to note Zach Reed getting through a game. Yay. Having Reed there, if you could actually have him there to support Mackay, he'll go such a long way. And Reed was my sleeper last year, and he could almost be a carryover if we allowed that, but we don't. He's just had such an awful run with injuries. Mackay was calling out for support last year.
And then the other guy who I'm making my sleeper for this year because he might be the key defender solution that this team needs. I liked what I saw out of Lewis Hayes. I just thought his positioning was good. He did a good job in his one-on-ones, didn't look overwhelmed. He's a 20-year-old, nearly 2-meter defender, and I'm kind of surprised he didn't get a debut last year. It's definitely time, especially considering, he's under contract for 2 more years.
Pryor's one that we've been waiting for a while. We expected the move would happen. Of course, his dad was an Essendon player for 7 years, Michael Pryor. Oh, wait, fuck. His dad was the one who made those ridiculous remarks about the fixturing when he was the Eagles head coach of the women's.
I am not going to totally drink the Kool-Aid and say, oh, yeah, this is a finals team, especially considering they were going up against a Geelong team who I'll talk about more when we get to them, but wasn't in full form and wasn't, outside of a couple of guys, super engaged physically. It was a lot more about prove you can function and don't get hurt, which is kind of how the Cats have handled the community series for a while. But I see a path towards this team being pretty successful. I think it has to look kind of similar to how that community series game looked. Maybe not quite, 4 goals from Isaac Kako every time, but him being a contributor up front. I think Peter Wright's stock at this point is just really low altogether. And maybe he ends up getting delisted after this year. Maybe I'm reading into it too much, but I see a path towards this team being pretty solid. I can also see them getting in their own way and doing just very Essendon things.
I don't know why. Well, I know why it popped in my head, but because of that cover of Go Your Own Way that has been on ads in both Australia and America, I just heard you say it. It was just they can get in their own way.
Oh, by the way,
you were talking about Pryor was really clean with the ball in the second half. And I don't think he's been given all that much attention this preseason, this summer. But halfback is an area where there had been a bit of a gap, with Dyson Heppel and Jake Kelly retiring. I mean, Kelly at this point wasn't that big of a loss. Heppel, we knew he was near the end though, but Pryor slides into there nicely. No turnovers in the second half. And I was going back and forth between him and Nick Bryan as my sleeper, but I don't see an emerging ruck like Bryan, especially with the whole questions about Draper's future as a sleeper. So I'll go with Pryor. I will remark about the ruck situation though. Draper starred in the ruck, but Bryan got his fair share as well. 14 hitouts for him compared to 25 for Draper. I hope that they actually give Bryan more full games this year because oftentimes they had him starting out and then getting subbed around 3/4 time, even when he played decently well. If you're committed to try and Draper forward, then give him those minutes when it matters. I feel like this very much does marginalize Todd Goldstein, sadly.
My skepticism with this team, I think, stems from just whether it's because they've drafted guys that they had high hopes for that didn't end up panning out, or because it's just their development is weird. They haven't gone in on some of the guys that have looked appealing, such as Elijah Sadas.
I'm thinking of 2 guys with nicknames. Now, Elijah Sadas, we call Varna because you went Sadas, Sawdust, Husqvarna, Varna. The other nickname that we were waiting on to emerge is much more straightforward, and he was definitely one of Essendon's best, one of their most physical, and that is Not Dead Ben.
Also, I like in the community series, I like Nick Martin playing further forward.
Keep that going, Brad. Keeping him on the wing feels like it just neuters his game because yes, he can run, but there's so much more there. There's some real skill there in attacking. If you can rotate him with Zach Merritt, which I've been calling for a hot minute now, 2 solid years, then I think you're going to get a lot more out of both of them. But yeah, I mean, I can heap praise onto that. I can heap praise onto Ben Hobbs for his 29 disposal game.
I mean, I'd rather see him on the wing than just in the back racking up fantasy stats.
Where I at least want him in the back, where I then wing, but I want to see more of the gut times of center square and half forward flank.
I think his heat map, in most common areas should be towards the front of kind of between the front of the center square and the forward 50. We can find out pretty quickly that nothing has changed with this team, but I'm at the very least intrigued because there is potential for a breakout here. Again, though, I don't trust their development structure. The fact that Elijah Sadas hardly plays.
The fact that Ben Hobbs didn't play much either. If this game is anything to go off, then I hope that they're backed in, because Essendon had a struggle last year with getting the midfield firing all at the same time. And whereas I love that Dylan Shield got and made the most of his opportunities near the end of the year, there was too much of a reliance on some other guys. Like, they kept trying to make Archie Perkins happen, and at this point, it just isn't happening. Like, that's a spot where we've been calling for Hobbs and for Martin to get more central. Meanwhile, up front, let's keep seeing Nate Caddy happen. Small forward, I'm still skeptical. I think positionally, the best thing that happened for one of their guys that I thought of as a forward and goal kicker before was moving Harry Jones more toward the wing and flank.
Harry!
That definitely revived him because he'd been struggling in more of a forward pocket role for a while. So if you let Jones out on the flank, still let Martin spread the field, you've got something there in terms of personnel. You know, you don't have the overwhelming height other than 2-meter Peter and Caddy as he keeps growing into things, but you've got enough mid-sized targets, I think. Development's an atypical one. Other midfielder that did debut last year, Archie Roberts. Hopefully he gets more of his opportunities this year. I think he's got a more normal number maybe that he's wearing too. Yeah, he's a 21.
What was he, 34?
Was he like 38?
Maybe. 38 now is Reese Unwin. Anytime they lose or draw, we can make some jokes about that.
Or anytime he's clutch, he just instantly becomes Reese Onions.
Onions! Double order!
Yes, it was 38. I had a mix up with Matt Roberts.
The Swans halfback. Whereas I won't trust Essendon with a lot of development things, I do want to trust him in terms of their supplemental pickups, because they did hit it with Nick Martin, and even though he was quiet in this game, the performance that Tom Edwards had put on a week prior to earn that spot was a really nice one, getting I believe it was 4 goals, and like the story of the guy too, like a middle school teacher getting an AFL spot. So that's a guy I'll definitely be pulling for, along with Xavier Durs, because he and his dad talked to us. We're through 10 now, and from Essendon we go one team away alphabetically.
Freo?
Well, we've already done Collingwood, so that narrows it down. Yup, it is Freo. Who fucked up the end game. I still can't believe that. So incredibly streaky last year and could not do anything in close games. In games decided by 13 points or fewer last year, the Dockers were 1-6-1.
So you would think that would improve? What's new here? Well, the big one is Shea Bolton. They delisted Ethan Hughes and Matt Taberner. Matt Taberner was just completely broken.
Unfortunate.
Broken. Not mentally, physically, as far as we know.
But Bolton seems like exactly the thing that Freo needs if Justin Longmire knows what he's doing. Because Freo needs to invite that chaos. And I hope that the message was sent to Longmire by how carefully his team played in that Indigenous All-Stars game to still get burned the way they did. Like, let these guys loose. You've got the small talent there. And even some of the older guys on the team now can still move things pretty well. I mean, guess Stam Switkowski would technically be on the older side at 28, but I think of guys like him, he can push the pace. And you got guys like Freddie who thrive off stuff like that.
Freddie!
Notable shift for the Dockers to start the year, though. Well, they're going to be without Hayden Young for the very start with his hamstring injury. And also, with Sean Darcy out because of his ankle, they will be going with Luke Jackson and Liam Reedy to start the year. And it looks like it's more of Jackson forward and Reedy in the ruck. So game on Sam DeConing. I mean, it should be Mark Blitzovs.
Yeah, I would think Blitzovs matches up with him, and DeConing, I don't know. I think Reece Stanley is going to end up making it in.
I don't like it.
You know, he showed enough towards the end of the year that I'm not completely opposed. which is weird because there are times last year when Stanley looked super washed. We'll get back to that when we talk about Geelong. This doesn't need to be second Geelong preview just because they play the Cats round 1.
Oh, they actually don't play the Cats twice this year. Oh, that's a shame. Those are fun meetings. Like that round 23 game, underrated banger from last year.
That was a fun, rewarding win.
One where Dangerfield had that incomprehensible miss, and I think Mana stepped up.
Was Mark O'Connor even in that? I was probably yelling for him to be, and he wasn't, and it worked out.
He didn't play past round 16 last year, Ethan, but let's avoid second Geelong preview.
Now, our votes for that game, Jack Henry was the only one. We gave Sarong 3, Young 2, Henry 1. The umpires definitely did it differently. If it wasn't Geelong round 1, I would be really sad about Hayden Young being out injured. Instead, I'm just kind of sad about it because I like watching him play. I think he's a guy who, kind of stretches the field well, takes up a lot of space because he's got longer kicks and the ability to read the field. Freo extended him. That's a huge, huge plus for them. I'm constantly in this dilemma wondering, is this team good because of the system Justin Longmuir has them play? Or is his system kind of holding them back a little? And I think as this team gets better, because this should be one of the most talented groups they've had in a while. They didn't just give away any really good player for free like they kind of had in the last couple of years.
No, instead, the story out west was West Coast overpaying.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe Longmuir needs to loosen his grip a little bit and let them just play more conventional footy because they have the talent to do it.
Like he could take a lesson from Ross Lyon and how he was able to let the Saints loose at the end of last year. The Saints won 6 of 8 to close things.
Double ups, obviously they have the Eagles twice. Other than that, it's a pretty nasty schedule. Of the teams that didn't make finals, one of them is your natural rival, one is Collingwood, and one is St. Kilda, who's just a pain to play against. And then you also have Port Sydney and the Bulldogs. So that is tricky. First 4 rounds at Geelong, home against the Swans. Your away derby, home against the Bulldogs. Rounds 9 through 12 right before the bye. I mean, if we'll include the Saints even, they go to play the Saints at Marvel round 8, then host Collingwood round 9 on a Thursday, at GWS, home against Port, at Gold Coast.
I like how at Gold Coast is notable here just because it's at Gold Coast.
And then the second half of the season, if you discount the home derby, the 3 weeks before that, at Sydney, hosting Hawthorn, at Collingwood. And then after that, hosting Carlton, at Port, home against Brisbane. And then you finish at the Bulldogs. Of the teams that don't have a whole bunch of finalists on the schedule, I think this is a really tough mix. This is, once again, a team that I'm sure I will be talking about a shit ton. I enjoy watching them. I think they have a lot of really interesting players. They might be my second team at this point.
I still don't know if I have a second team, but it's very clear that the Dockers are yours.
Yeah, I like GWS.
I think they're as close to everybody's second team as you can get.
Just, they're fun.
This is like a frustrating fun watch, though, because that they're capable of so much more than they've been able to do so far. Do you have one of those interesting people as your sleeper pick?
I think this is actually one of my less interesting picks. I'm just going with him because he's had bad injury luck, and I think he's got a chip. Maybe the chips will fall right, and he'll have a chance to break through this year, and that's Carl Warner.
Okay, based on that description, I thought you were going to say somebody else.
Who?
I can't believe you didn't take him, so fucking I am.
That's not even fair. That doesn't even. He's so well established in our eyes that I don't think you could even take Nathan O'Driscoll. I think that's really weak.
Right, all right, damn. But O'Driscoll has had that sort of rotten luck too. And I was fascinated watching him as one of the better performers in the Indigenous All-Stars game for Freo because he actually played inside. And that's something we really hadn't seen from him. I mean, when you think about O'Driscoll, you think of him almost being stapled to a wing, kind of like Jeremy Sharp. But he's got the body type to play a more interior role. And if you're worried about Young's durability with how he started this year on the injured list, then yeah, give Nathan that opportunity. I've also been looking at the defensive structure for this group. Warner, I don't know if I consider Josh Draper established enough to be a sleeper, but he's one that I also really want to focus on. And Draper's the other one that I was eyeing because even though he played, I think, like 20 games last year, I think he'd flown under the radar pretty much that entire time. Yeah, he played exactly 20 games.
I always find it interesting with this team how few big like Thursday and Friday games they get. Now, they have a couple scheduled and they're both at home. It's like, other than that draw against Richmond, I feel like they never get away Thursday or Friday games. They will be hosting Collingwood on a Thursday in round 9 and then Essendon in round 15. Oh, and they're at St. Kilda on a Friday in round 8. I just realized this.
Ooh, Friday Ross Lyon Cup.
And the week before they host that like Anzac night game.
The Len Hall game was against Adelaide this year, I believe.
Remember they hosted Adelaide early last year and I said like, oh, this is going to be a really fun game and ended up being shitty.
I think that was one of their best crowds last year too. I think that was a Good Friday. They had a Good Friday night game. Instead, they're at Melbourne for Easter week, and it's the Eagles who have the Good Friday evening game against Essendon. I think that's fabulous in terms of like travel prospects for that, but
that might be like legit sold out. So just to run this down real quick, looking through special games at different times this year, we have Port playing that Sunday night to cap off.
Gather round.
Easter round, we have West Coast and Essendon on the Friday. We have Sunday night Saints Dogs. Okay. Strange pick, but I'll allow it. I do like the idea of having an Easter Sunday night game. That's good.
Wait, we're going to have like 3 actual Sunday night games this year because 2 rounds later, you've got the Queensland Labor Day holiday and we got Q Clash then.
I love that that's becoming a tradition as well. As we mentioned previously, you've got that Freo Adelaide Friday Anzac game. We've got the Melbourne Richmond Anzac Eve game.
We've got the Giants hosting a night game for Anzac weekend again. Thank you.
We actually have 3 Sunday games on Mother's Day.
Oh, I wasn't even thinking about that, but yeah, we do. King's birthday, we know the Eve and day games for that. And the Eve game will probably draw more fans yet again. Other notes on Freo, it was so much in terms of injury luck last year, in terms of bad luck. All of Pierce, Darcy, and Tracy coughing blows around the same time. I mean, Pierce did his arm twice.
And the second time was like, why did you bring him back so early?
Consistent question also is just how much will the late collapse, that sort of hangover, how much will that collapse from last year's pointy end carry into the not so pointy but still significant end to start the year here in 2025? Or the semi-medium with a touch of awkward, easy, hard play. One more to go for this second home and away preview episode. I like how we've had, a good mix of Victorian and non-Victorian teams so far. We've gone
up and down the ladder pretty well too.
Yeah, I mean, it set us up for a good finale, even if we can't leave the brain rot to the finale. Let's talk about the Hawks, who are playing opening round, remember, because they've got the Swans on the Friday night before what's becoming a traditional round 1 game against Essendon the next Friday. So they're starting Friday, Thursday.
It's funny because it was like so hard for this team to get primetime games in the past couple years, including this past year. And now all of a sudden, Rory Kilpatrick, AFL Glicko, one of the people that we both look at as one of the smarter footy people we follow.
That I totally want to get on here, by the way, if he's down.
He has not previewed Hawthorn yet, which means his simulations have Hawthorn, Brisbane, and the Bulldogs as the top 3. I don't know how much that factors in, injuries and stuff with the Dogs. But yeah, this team goes, okay, I do like the idea of keeping Hawthorn Essendon round 1, but I thought that was always going to be like a round 1 afternoon game. It's going to be weird to be a Friday night. They also have the Thursday game in Darwin round 10. So it's the Hawks and Dogs that go to Darwin this year?
Pencil those in as losses for them.
If there's someone who could win a game in Darwin, it would be one of those two, because both those teams have the talent to do it.
They've also both gotten draxed by Gold Coast and Darwin in recent years, though.
In terms of scheduling stuff that looks really difficult, aside from having, the round 4 bye because of the start of the year, I think, is pretty difficult. At Sydney, Essendon, Carlton, GWS, bye, at Port, Easter Monday with Geelong. Then you have one of the softest stretches of the entire season. Eagles, Tigers, D's before you go out to Darwin. Come back from that, get the Lions and Collingwood at the G. Get the Dogs at Marvel. Have that. I love the idea of a Friday night game in Tasmania. Hopefully the electricians don't go on strike again.
Oh, God. No, I mean, that's a pretty brutal stretch there, actually, rounds 10 through 14. You don't usually see teams playing both the Queensland sides back to back, but they are. And yes, they're doubling up against the Lions. I love that. And yeah, Hawthorn and Adelaide have provided some good ones in recent times, particularly in Tasmania. You had the Riley Philthorpe debut game, Anzac Day 2021. I think we might be the only ones who remember this game as fondly as we do because, what was that? Hawthorn 15-12-102, defeating Adelaide 16-3-99. The Crows started 15 straight and lost, and Philthorpe kicked 5.
I think this is actually a really tough schedule, just other than that one super soft stretch.
By the way, the other game that I was thinking of must have been a couple years ago now with a late winner for the pocket by Darcy Fogarty.
Rounds 17 through 24, you go Saints at Marvel, at Freo, Port in Tasmania, Carlton, at Adelaide, Collingwood, Melbourne, whatever, at Brisbane.
My instant thought is that game has huge finals potential. Could be like a national TV game Friday or Saturday night, that Brisbane Hawthorn game in round 24.
How funny is it that we look at Melbourne so differently now and Hawthorn so differently when, remember they played in, what was it, round 2 last year? Hawthorn got destroyed, 93-38, and we had so little to say about either. And then just a few weeks later, the Hawks started to get their shit together. Things started to fall apart for Melbourne. Total vibe shift.
I think we were kind of aware of the blueprint for Hawthorn. We just didn't think it would have happened so quickly because we'd identified so much of what made them strong before it happened in terms of the ability to take things at speed, the aggression, kind of going centrally from the wings into the half forward line. We told you, Essendon, you fucking idiots, to get rid of Massimo.
Also, just big picture, they've built this core kind of from the inside out. Like this is, yes, they have a couple of guys up front who are kind of like constant meme content, but also like they've built just a really legit midfield. Combine that with now adding in Josh Battle and Tom Barris on the back, an emerging young forward in Cal Sherdier who's kind of getting to take the reins from Jack Gunston. And this looks like a team that's going to be a pain in the ass for a long time. And like, imagine what could happen if Connor Nash stays healthy with that midfield core.
I'm in no way a Hawthorn fan. I wouldn't consider them one of the teams that I genuinely like, but
I've described them as little twerps.
But damn, that Day Nash Newcomb group always has me salivating when I'm watching them.
I really like Jai Newcomb. He's
honestly, is he like the number 2 Brownlow candidate now behind Nick Dacos?
I mean, of guys who haven't won one, I would put him right up there.
The Ashcrofts are going to start taking votes off Lockie Neal now.
The Ashcrofts, Kai Lohman. Who else took votes off of Neal and ours last year? Cam Rayner.
Yeah. We didn't even mention the Ashcrofts really when we were talking about the Lions earlier, just because that felt like a given. And Levi looked good right away. But with Hawthorn, I mean, Will Day unlocked so much for this team, and it was apparent when they bowed out, even though it was close, how much Day could have gotten him over a bit. Day also unlocks Connor Nash's physicality, I think.
For a team that is only facing 3 teams that were finalists in double ups, I think this is a pretty tough mix, considering that you've got both South Australian teams. You've got Collingwood as another in the non-finalists. Really, other than Melbourne, this is a pain in the ass schedule, which they are not the hot new thing anymore. I think they're becoming a much more established thing. I think we're kind of, they're kind of entering the mainstream discussion again. And I'm glad that they're going to be faced with some challenges. Now, I do think it's very possible that they kind of, they overachieved a bit last year. So maybe just their step forward this year is a smaller one, or they kind of stay the course from where they were last year instead of continuing to improve at such a high trajectory.
Could they also step back? Certainly. And as an Eagles fan, dependent on their first 3 draft picks, I wouldn't mind. But do I expect that? No.
I think what's tricky about this team is, like, other than an injury to their major midfield core, like, where could things kind of go wrong? And I think it's just this could end up being a team that doesn't quite have, like, the supplemental pieces. You know, say Jarman Impey starts to show his age, or Carl Amon becomes less effective. Early returns don't suggest it, but, like, Blake Hardwick, what if he was just kind of a one-off revelation? Or say Jack Scrimshaw or Finn McGuinness doesn't really amount to much. I feel like that's where this team could be something lesser. Or what if Josh Weddle's going to be less effective? I think, though, I feel more confident in this team's known quantities than almost any other than the Lions, and I guess maybe like the Swans or Dogs. Like, we trust that their main guys are going to be legit.
Well, also defensively now, I mean, it's definitely a different defensive structure considering they brought in both Tom Barris and Josh Battle.
What's a battle?
And so that unlocks a lot for Sicily and Weddle. I mean, Weddle has already shown his versatility, and I love that about him. You could get Sicily in the forward line a good bit more now, too. And maybe he could end up having a sort of Hardwick-like role where he could be more of a swing man in game.
So I guess the question becomes, like, is Josh Battle really that impactful?
We've been asking this from the moment Hawthorne set his sights on him, and like a legitimate bidding war happened over Josh Battle? Like, really?
I think part of it with him could be as simple as that it unlocks more for other guys rather than what Battle does himself. I think that's very possible.
Ask not what your Battle could do for you, but what you could do for your Battle.
And then, you know, is just being on a good team what it took to get that consistent effort out of Mabior Chol? Because it seemed like an effort thing. And then the obvious one, you know, does CJ stay healthy? He's another one in the category of, like, great when he's out there.
Well, he's missing the start of the season, is he not, with his hip injury?
Yeah, that's what it looks like. Other than that, you know, getting much back from ADL.
Wait 1 sec. You know who really took advantage of his opportunities once CJ was out at the end of last year was Harry Morrison.
Harry!
He's not a guy that I see, you know, being factored into a lot of discussion right now, but like that's the sort of depth piece we're looking for.
Yeah, can that keep up? Is that sustainable? I have far more questions about that than I do about Newcomb, Day, Nash, Warple. I guess of that main 4, Warple is the one that I think maybe takes a step back from last year.
You see, I don't even see Warple as that main 4 for them anymore, even though he's a follower type.
He's a huge clearance guy still.
I don't know. Like the guy that I keep thinking about that I'm surprised that we haven't mentioned yet, even though he plays more forward, just with his playmaking ability, his high assist ability, is Dylan Moore. Does that keep up? Like we've been waiting for that for him for so long, and it was so nice. I mean, even in the 3 games that he had in 2020, he was a player that I kind of remembered. And yeah, it felt rewarding to see him get an All-Australian blazer. But like, if he takes a step back, what's next? Ginnivan and McDonald, you said, were firing on all cylinders. Who can maybe fill in there? Well, I think there's a really good candidate for filling in for that midfield and half forward spot in a former first rounder who I've been super high on. And unfortunately, you took Cam McKenzie as your sleeper.
Yeah, I've just heard from so many different sources that he's taken a really big jump in training. So I'm going to take the safe pick here. Also because this team is in a position where I think this could be a pretty tough lineup to crack in a lot of other areas for guys who might be a bit of a surprise. Now, it looks like Cal Shadir being out the first few rounds is definitely a concern. He's got some bone stress in his back. That is significant. But outside of injuries, I feel like there are a lot of really safe bets for this team. And I feel like if they're to be undone by something other than injuries, it's going to be something surprising that we don't see coming, like regression from someone we expected to be really good.
And I mean, McKenzie, yeah, I did think of him as a sleeper, but I mean, he was already averaging 15 touches and 2.5 tackles a game last year. He's far from an unknown quantity. And in his limited VFL action, he's always impressed there. So yeah, that next step does seem likely for him. The guy that I kept going back to for my sleeper pick was Jai Sarong, even though it's going to be tough to crack that defensive alignment.
I mean, I guess there's an avenue there, but he's going to have to take advantage of opportunities the moment they hit, because I don't think there's going to be that many unless, you know, the injuries really start to pile up.
Or Scrimshaw underperforms, for example. But Sarong's a versatile, bigger body as well, so maybe you could see him getting some halfback opportunities as well. Like, there's a spot for him somewhere along the line, I would think. I just realized, like, Sam Frost is no longer best 23 with these additions. And it's not that he had a bad year last year. Like, it was the least Frost-bally Frost year in a damn long time.
Yeah, kind of got replaced with Unhinged. I guess someone else kind of needs to join the chaos this year.
And we're talking defensive chaos here. You're always going to have forward chaos with guys that just have their set shot struggles. You think about Harry Mackay a couple years ago, Logan McDonald this past year. But yeah, who would be your tandem then for that defender? Or do we just not know until we know?
We'll know it when we see it.
That we're through 2/3 of our home and away previews, and damn, I like the look that we've got for this final episode as well, because we have 4 states represented and a pretty wide range of ladder positions too, including both of our own teams.
Only 2 Victorian teams remain. That's interesting. We haven't gotten into New South Wales yet, and we've only got 2 Victorian teams left, but yeah, fun mix. Got a couple of teams that should be towards the bottom, a couple that you feel really good about making finals,
and one team where we will just believe it when we see it.
You know, typically, the reason we do this randomly is when people do previews, in most cases, they usually go, you know, either alphabetically or in order of the previous year's finish from bottom to top, or projected finish from bottom to top. So it's kind of fun doing this, keeping you on your toes and just letting the internet kind of decide.
Keeps us on our toes too.
So we will join you again soon. Until then, yeah, follow us at American Footy. Follow me at Castle Media, him at Benjamin HK01, the executive producer at Cat Named Brian. Anything else?
I think you took care of business. I'm gonna see if I can catch some cricket before school. Bye.